Hey everyone, in this video we're going to talk about the policy analysis tables, and then that's Appendix B in the syllabus, and then we're going to talk about the policy review and analysis paper. So similar to previous semesters, you're going to use the tables to collect information, and then that's going to be what you write about in the paper in Appendix D. So that forms the basis of the stuff that you're going to talk about in the paper. All right, so let me pull over. Oops. Start at the top here. So the first thing you have to do here is select a policy. I recommend that you pick a federal policy, and I recommend that you picked one that was passed some time ago. And the reason for that is that there'll actually be more research that you can draw from. Picking things that are new or newer, they haven't been studied, they haven't really been evaluated. It's a little bit more difficult to find sources. It's not impossible, but it is a little more difficult. You could study a state policy if you want to. You could also study a bill that's under consideration by some legislative body. However, this is certainly the case with state policies and with bills. They just haven't been studied a whole lot, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult to find sources. It's not impossible, and if you're really interested in studying one of the state policies, like marijuana legislation, for example, there are places that you can look for sources. And that's stuff that we could talk about either over email or over the phone or something like that. So what's the difference between a bill and a policy? Well, a policy is a bill that has simply been passed by a legislative body. So all sort of laws or policies start out as bills, and bills are what are debated by legislative bodies. They're amended, they work through committees and things like that, and then they're enacted by the legislative body and signed into law, usually by an executive, either the president or a governor. And so at that point, they become policies. So again, my recommendation is that you pick a policy and you pick something that has some sort of time behind it. And that's really, like I said, for the sake of finding sources. So I've listed just like 8 or 10 sources here. There are, sources, 8 or 10 example federal policies here. There are literally dozens and dozens of other policies that you could select from. And in a second here, we'll talk about sort of how to think about selecting a policy. So TANF is Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. That was welfare reform that was passed in the 90s and under the Clinton administration. Old age and survivors insurance is Social Security. Supplemental security income is disability. Food Conservation and Energy Act of 2008 is what formed the SNAP policy. So SNAP is what's usually thought of as food stamps. WIC, which is Women, Infants, and Children, it was passed in 1966. That was the Child Nutrition Act. Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, CAPTA, obviously deals with child abuse prevention and treatment. Refugee Act, Mental Health Parity Act. FMLA is Family Medical Leave Act. And Title X, the very last one, that acts as a Roman numeral. So Title X is what funds Planned Parenthood and other agencies that do reproductive health work and family planning kinds of things. So again, what I listed is only a small sample. There are literally dozens of others that you can study. Now, I recommend that you pick a policy that interests you. If it can intersect with your capstone, that would be ideal. And if you're having trouble thinking about how something would interact with or sort of intersect with your capstone, shoot me an email and we can talk about it. I've got lists of a bunch more policies that we could talk through. Like I said, what I put here was only a small sample of what's out there. Now, for the tables and then for the paper, you're looking for about 20 sources. And the assignment's divided, the tables assignment is divided into sort of two halves again. So you're going to submit 10 tables, and then you're going to submit 10 others. And when we get through the slides here in the next couple of minutes, I'll switch over to the template that's available to you, and we'll talk through it real quick. So a couple places to look for sources. Obviously, the academic literature is one, but I would say that probably 20% or so of your sources are going to come from the academic literature. The vast majority of your other sources are going to come from other places, and one of them is governmental sources themselves. So the CDC, for example, is the Centers for Disease Control, Department of Education. SAMHSA is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Department of Agriculture administers the SNAP program. National Institutes of Health. It does a lot of the health research. If you did something related to crime or corrections reform, the Department of Justice and the FBI would be good places to work. The reason when we're doing policy study that we look for government information is that the government studies itself. It wants to know that what it's doing is effective, or having what the outcome, what change is the policy having. The other place to look are think tanks, or sort of standalone research institutes that sort of study policy. So these are sometimes government watchdogs. They're sometimes consultants to the government, but they study policy. They often have a specialization. The Kaiser Family Foundation, for example, one that's listed a couple down, they study health policy. So does the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and the AHRQ is also sort of health related as well. What I've put up here is only a few of the think tanks that are sort of out there. Google would be your friend here, and you'll easily find links to many other sort of think tanks that study policy. The nice thing about this is that these institutes will make their reports available online. So you have to cruise around their website. They all have search boxes that you can sort of search for. But these are all great places to look for sources. A few other places. I don't have links for these, or I didn't add them to the table. But again, or the table on the previous slide here. But a quick Google search will get you to their website without any trouble. The Congressional Budget Office is actually the sort of nonpartisan sort of research arm of the government, and they have a number of reports available on their website. And then the Brookings Institution, the Cato Institute, the RAND Corporation. These are other think tanks that that would likely be of interest to you. Again, a quick search would probably illuminate any number of other think tanks that would have sort of good policy study information available to you. Still, other places you can look. So, in addition to sort of academic literature and government sources, and then think tanks, the other sort of group of sources that's available to you is journalism. And what we're typically looking for here is sort of long-form journalism. These are in-depth stories. Sometimes they're called exposés. And this often means pieces that are found in Vox, The Atlantic, The Economist. In the next slide, I've got sort of a bunch listed for you. And the reason we can look for journalism, or we can look to journalism in policy studies, is that the function of journalism really is to sort of hold government accountable and convey information to the citizenry. It's often journalists that are sort of doing some of the first analyses of a government action or a particular policy. So that's sort of the last group of or last sort of category of sources that are available to you. So one of the things that we need to think about, though, is what kind of journalism sources are we accessing? And this is a chart that makes its way around the internet from time to time. So what you're looking for really is is stuff that is reporting original facts and is as neutral as possible. So in general, you're looking for sources that are sort of in this green, um, this sort of green kind of box. It would be okay to dip down into this yellow box. You'll notice I listed the Economist on that previous slide, and they're listed under here. That's because they're doing a little bit more analysis than they are sort of reporting, and that analysis is sometimes useful for us. I also recommended Vox, and sort of they're in this yellow box here too, but they very much skew liberal. The National Review is sort of the conservative equivalent to Vox, and they often have really excellent journalism as well. The kinds of things that I would stay away from, the kinds of sources that I would stay away from, are really anything sort of, down here in either of these corners. They're really trying to sort of advance an agenda, and they're doing that at times with misleading information. So again, the way to locate sources with any of these would be to head to their website and do some searching. Now, if you run into a paywall, as is common with journalism, the place to go would be the library, and the library has subscriptions to most of these sources. And you would likely be able to find an article there. So the message, or sort of my message of being aware of partisanship, extends to information that you get from think tanks as well. Economic think tanks usually have a political leaning, and some think tanks exist to push really the agenda of one party, or sort of damage the reputation of another party. And so one of the boxes that you'll see on the table assignment here, when we switch over to that Word document, one of the boxes that you'll see is a chance for you to sort of evaluate its quality. Now, not everything that you're going to find is going to be sort of completely neutral, and that's fine. But what you're doing is sort of maybe putting in some caveats when you use the information from your paper. So let me just pause this real quick, and I'll switch over to the table. All right, so here's the table again, and this template is on Moodle for you. You can adjust these however you need to. You can make things bigger, smaller, whatever. I've just put one on this page, so you can copy and paste it as many times as you need to. Again, what you're looking for here is sort of 20 sources. So I've got a box for the citation. So that way, when you do go to write your paper, you can just transfer the reference over to the end of the paper. Information about the source, if you think that would be useful. Then a box for sort of the big idea, the main idea, the thesis statement. This box could probably be smaller, if you want it to be. And then some information about details and supporting evidence. Then there's a box for methodology, so how do they arrive at the conclusions? And then there's a chance here for you to sort of talk about the quality and reliability of the source. So any information about whether you think something is neutral or whether you think something is really partisan would go here. And what I'm looking for really is sort of evidence that something is sort of neutral, or evidence that something is evidence from your point of view that something is sort of partisan. And then this is just sort of a miscellaneous box down here, which maybe you won't use for every source, but in case there was something that sort of didn't fit in one of the other boxes, you could put it up here. So again, as with before, you're welcome to get in touch with questions. That's always the case. Send me an email with whatever. With the decision you've made about what policy you're going to study, and again, if you're having trouble selecting one that sort of intersects with the capstone, let me know, and we can talk about some ideas. Okay, thanks for watching.